Narayana namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. So, Hare Krishna. So we are continuing our discussion of the third canto, chapter 9. And the previous session, I believe we stopped midway around the verse 15 of chapter 9. And today we plan to conclude the discussion. We set the stage for the past two sessions that Lord Brahma is in a state of lamentation as he is beginning the process of creation. The state of lamentation is simply because he is seeing the lunacy of living entities in their being trapped and their being enamored by activities which in ultimate sense have no meaning. So he is practically creating a playground. He is creating a sandbox for the living entities who have very deep fruitive desires. And Lord Brahma's duty is to create a sandbox, a playground for these living entities. And then he is also observing the fact that the karmic reactions of the living entities are so intense that they are held by supernatural power in terms of what they can and they cannot do, which means they're literally captured by what they have already accomplished or what they have already desired. So a certain path has been taken, a path has been decided upon, and they are heading towards the outcome at breakneck speed. They're not ready to listen. And this is because the force of their karmic reactions is almost like a supernatural force which has held on to them. So he is lamenting the fact that he has a very thankless duty of creating an environment where, minus the mercy of the Lord, there's going to be further incarceration for several lifetimes. So he is lamenting the fact. Now, this lamentation of someone with higher consciousness is quite natural. Someone with higher consciousness would look at our own projects for eating, sleeping, mating, defending as sheer lunacy. They would probably look at it and say that this is just madness. And they would wonder how we could even ascribe any kind of pleasure to some of the activities that we engage in, because for them, it would be sheer madness. They would only see this as being a furtherance of our incarceration, a furtherance of our binding into this playground. And Lord Brahma has the thankless task of creating a playground. He has a thankless task of creating a sandbox for the living entities to play with. So he is practically in lamentation at the beginning of this chapter. However, as we progress further through the verses of the chapter, we also observe that Lord Brahma is also quite afraid. He is afraid of the fact that because he is engaging in all these activities, because he has assumed the identity of a creator, he is a sub-creator, he is an empowered creator, he is not the main creator, he has received a blueprint, he has received intelligence, he has received power to create. And he's just afraid that he will get so caught up in all these particular entrapments that he might forget the real purpose of life. And this is Lord Brahma's fear. So it is said that when there's proper self-realizations, there will be proper humility. And why is there that once you advance in spiritual culture, one develops humility? Is because they know more than someone who has just stepped into spiritual culture. They're aware of what it is that they can actually lose. Those who are new to spiritual culture haven't quite understood what they have been given. They have not understood that they have been given something which is almost impossible to obtain in this creation. It is almost impossible. Why is it almost impossible? Because Lord Brahma himself is in lamentation. He is the creator. He is an extraordinarily powerful entity, and he is practically in lamentation that this particular force that is entrapping all living entities is supernatural. This is not a force that can be reckoned with easily. So he is fully aware of it. So he is practically in lamentation. Now, the point I'm trying to make is, when you are being put into a circumstance controlled by forces that are supernatural, where you have very little elbow room to maneuver, then if some good fortune comes our way where we can remove ourselves from this incarceration, then that good fortune is just mercy. It is not some arrangement that we could have possibly made, because we didn't have the choice of an arrangement even before. We just didn't have a choice. Now this arrangement has been made, and we're coming in touch with very powerful spiritual culture. We're coming in touch with some of the most confidential truths of spirituality and Krishna consciousness. And this particular spiritual culture is being given to us, and it is being given to us by mercy. It is just mercy, because there really isn't any way for us to have been able to walk away from the nonsense that we would normally get involved in, because that's how powerful material energy is. Material energy is so powerful that the creator, Lord Brahma, who is in charge of the creation process, who is in charge of Rajoguna, he is in charge of the passion that permeates this universe. He practically is so afraid because he understands the power of the Lord's external energy. He also understands the opportunity that's been given to him. So he has already gone through the process. He has gone through the process of engaging in tapasya. He has gone through the process of engaging in chanting. What did he accomplish with the chanting that he did for 1,000 years? There's 1,000 celestial years. What did Lord Brahma accomplish with his chanting? By chanting the mantra that Krishna gave him, Lord Brahma accomplished achieving his true identity. He was able to displace his illusion, and he was able to understand his identity. Because if you don't establish an identity, you will not know what to do. If someone becomes a father, then along with becoming a father come duties of a father. So dharma requires that one becomes cognizant of that particular identity. If someone were to become a parent, then there's a certain dharma which is associated with becoming a parent. So unless you establish the identity of a parent, you wouldn't be able to be fully cognizant of the dharma. So it is like saying that unless you establish an identity, the idea of acting within that identity is not known. So how will you know what to do and what not to do if you do not have an identity that is associated with the spiritual sky? If we do not have an identity associated with the spiritual sky, how would we act and how would we leave this incarceration? This is a supernatural force. So Lord Brahma followed the process of Vidhi. He is called Vidhi because he is an expert in imposing rules and regulations. Vidhi means rules and regulations. So he has a name called Vidhi as well, because he practically followed the teachings of the Vedas. It was revealed to him. Krishna revealed by a mystical process at the beginning of the creation that you have been created from me, you are Swayambhu, you are manifested from my prowess. And for you to know your purpose, you need to establish your identity. So he gave him a process to establish the identity. What was the process? He gave him the process of chanting a mantra. Krishna initiated Lord Brahma with a mantra to establish his identity. So Lord Brahma started chanting the mantra, and over a period of 1,000 celestial years, he was able to re-establish his identity as being a servant of Krishna. So that identity of understanding who we are and who is the Vishaya, the object, and who are we, in terms of our relationship with Krishna. And then the idea of being able to fall in love with the object of our love and then surrendering to him, that is what allows us to serve properly. So without an identity, Lord Brahma couldn't serve. He was bewildered. He was trying to find his origin. He was traversing down the stem that that emanated from the lotus navel of Sri Vishnu. And then when he could not find his origin by endeavor is just physical endeavor. He was traversing down the stem. He was saying, how did I happen here? How did I come to being? So he started coming down the lotus stem. Yeah, and the lotus stem is a subtle lotus stem. It's practically a subtle stem which connects Brahma, Lord Brahma, to his origin. As he came down and by physical prowess, by endeavor, he couldn't really achieve anything. And then he received mercy, because seeing this bewilderment and his eagerness and his despondency in wanting to serve but not knowing what to do, Krishna manifests through sound energy, saying that you must engage in tapasya. There has to be tapasya because you need to purify your senses, which is why we have to purify our senses by engaging in tapasya. What is our tapasya? Our tapasya is not a matter of putting ourselves through torture. It is not a matter of being able to endeavor in a circumstance where the body is tortured in different ways and then we engage in tapasya. That tapasya belongs to the asuras. We don't care for it. Our tapasya is to be able to use our senses under all conditions in the service of the Lord, even if we are not very eager to do so because of our attitude. It's because it's like a prisoner who doesn't know what is good for them. We just do not know what is good for us because we've been conditioned to act otherwise for millions of lifetimes. Remember the topic of the supernatural force that's holding us down. We have been conditioned to make plans for the future. We have been conditioned to make plans which are quite distinct, separate, and which can only lead to more trouble because that's our culture. That's basically how we are cultured. This is why the Creator himself was lamenting. So Lord Brahma engaged in tapasya. The tapasya was to sit and chant for 1,000 years. He fixed himself in the process of engaging in vidhi, the process of chanting. And he chanted the mantra that was given to him, the Gayatri by Krishna. And that revealed his identity. That revealed who he was in relationship to Krishna. Because without the revelation of the identity, one will not know what is the dharma associated with the identity. One will not know that. Yeah. You cannot know the dharma associated with an identity unless you come to that identity. As we come closer and closer and closer to that identity, greater would be the revelation of dharma, greater would be the ability to love, greater would be the ability to surrender, and as a consequence, greater would be the efficiency of service. So right now, Lord Brahma is bewildered. He does not know what to do. And similarly, we are bewildered because we do not know what to do. We have been given a process of tapasya. We've been asked by Srila Prabhupada to chant the Mahamantra because it's worked before. There's evidence that it has worked before. Far more intelligent, far more accomplished beings on this planet with much, much greater resources have accomplished a great deal by the chanting of the Mahamantra. So it's worked before. So there's evidence that it has worked before. It's been documented. Their experiences have been documented quite clearly. So one can fall back on documentation of what the experiences are. We can fall back on the confidence that it has worked before, and we take it up. So we have been given a process, and the process itself is to chant just like Lord Brahma did. And what is the outcome of all this chanting that we do? What is the outcome of all the service that we do? The idea is to re-establish our identity, because without establishing that identity, we would not know what to do. We don't know what our services are. Right now, we engage in services based on propensity. There's a certain conditioning. I'm good at something, so I can offer this to Krishna, which is wonderful. Or I'm available, I can offer myself to Krishna, which is wonderful as well. But then, what does Krishna really desire? That will not be known until we establish our identity. So the idea is that just as much as Lord Brahma wanted to know what to do, he established his identity by chanting, by engaging in the tapasya. Then he had an audience with the Lord, and the blueprint for the universe was conveyed to Lord Brahma, saying, this is what I want you to accomplish. So now Lord Brahma had clarity. He knew that there was a higher purpose to his creation of the universe. He knew that this is exactly what the Lord wanted. He wanted to facilitate the living entities as they engage in their fruitive activities. He wanted Lord Brahma to create an environment as incarcerating as material energy is, as incarcerating as material universe is. There's also opportunity for progress because one could engage in service with the same level of opportunity as one would if they were to simply engage in material endeavor. So this particular opportunity was given where we could engage in activity just as much as Lord Brahma did, and that activity is to re-establish our identity. Because re-establishing the identity is the only way we're going to serve. Abhideya is service. Abhideya is devotional service. It is bhakti. Bhakti is abhideya. But then how do you perform bhakti? Whom will you perform bhakti toward without establishing sambandha, without establishing the relationship between ourselves and Krishna? Then how would you engage in abhideya? Which is what Lord Brahma did. And then after he has accomplished all of this, Lord Brahma begins the process of creation, but then he is overwhelmingly humble because he has been humbled. He has now understood whom he is working for. He has understood the plans. He has understood the pitfalls in terms of what is being arranged and, the pitfalls of being in the material universe. And even if you're working for the Lord, there are pitfalls. You have to be very careful. And what is the care that's being taken by Lord Brahma? In this particular chapter, he's practically teaching us how to approach our own activity in this world. Because the more closely we understand Krishna's plan, greater would be our freedom from being captured by material energy. So as a consequence, Lord Brahma engaged in tapasya to understand Krishna's plan. And by engaging with the tapasya and understanding Krishna's plan, he is also praying to Krishna saying, I'm afraid, because the mode of passion is not easy. Mode of passion is not easy. In fact, the devotee problem is the mode of passion. The devotee problem around the world is the mode of passion, because one is in mode of passion, then they go window shopping in the universe. If you have passion in you, and if the passion is not properly engaged or tempered with wisdom, if it is not engaged and tempered with association, if it is not engaged and tempered with a higher purpose, then we have a problem, because this passion can practically put us in touch with material energy, and all kinds of desires would erupt in the heart. Yeah, desires are directly associated with passion. This is a devotee issue, yeah, because you need to be in touch with passion in the material world, in the corporate world. Because if you're not passionate about wanting to endeavor, wanting to rise higher, if you're not passionate about creating things and doing things properly, then you don't really survive there, because, it's a matter of years before they just feel that, you're not really contributing. You're either going up or you're out. It's one of those particular circumstances. It's generally true in America, where if you don't succeed in good organizations, if you don't get promoted, you're out. They kind of make an observation that you have to be promoted within such and such time. If you don't get promoted, then they replace you because you're fired. So basically, the point is that you need to have passion for you to be able to move forward. And then when passion comes in, you develop all kinds of desires other than what it is required for. And then we bring all those desires, then all those desires are not in alignment with Krishna consciousness. So we create a future for ourselves for the next 20 years, which is completely misaligned and not in alignment with Krishna consciousness. And then 20 years hence, because of age, we get a little sober, we start waking up, and then we start thinking that I must now become serious with Krishna consciousness. And then we find that life is very complicated, because we have created all this complexity over 20 years of desiring things which are really not related to Krishna. And then 20 years down the line, life becomes super complicated to take on. And at that time, Krishna has to fit in somewhere or the other in the complexity of life. And that's why we start struggling with the process that's actually lucid and simple and straightforward. The chanting process that has been given to us is an extraordinarily straightforward, simple endeavor. What austerity is a devotee performing, to be honest? What is it? Are we starving? We eat more than most people do. We are an eating religion. We cook more than most people do. For most people, they don't eat as well as we do. They do not. Our fasting days are feasting days. Most people like the Ekadashi because it seems to offer more facility for feasting. than a regular day. There are devotees who like Ekadashi food. So we practically fast by eating. And then we have been given a process where out of 1,440 minutes in a day, for most devotees, we allocate approximately 150 minutes to chant our 16 rounds. It's less than a tenth, approximately. Yeah, approximately the tenth of the day. 1/10 of the day is given. And then Krishna says, you don't need to do anything. Then we have a few festivals. Yeah, we have a few festivals which are all fun. Then every time in Kartik, we leave and then we all have fixed vacation spots. We come to the Dham. So our practice of spirituality is fun. It's just very, very easy. We don't have any austerity doubled into it. We don't have any austerity. The austerity is because we have created a lifestyle which doesn't quite fit in with the good things of Krishna consciousness. And this lifestyle which has been created is quite complex because it doesn't allow a simple feature of Krishna consciousness to fit in. Yeah, it really doesn't allow us. Why did this very complex lifestyle get created? It got created because 20 years back, we weren't thinking of this identity of wanting to serve Krishna. We had other ideas. So there was passion. Passion had to come in touch with ideas, and then passion created a future. And here we are 20 years hence with few complications to boot. And as a consequence, a very simple process of Krishna consciousness becomes challenging because life is complex. Yeah, Krishna consciousness is simple, but life is complicated. So what is the way out? We need to kind of fall in line with Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma practically was bewildered and he sought a process. He took up the idea of chanting seriously, but he also had sincere desires. He practically was afraid that material energy could capture him. And he took deep shelter of the Lord and the Lord's protection. And he started chanting, wanting to create, but not be captured by the creation, which means being in the world, but not of the world. Yeah, you can be in the world, but you don't need to be of the world. This is what Lord Brahma is trying to do. He's practically trying to play the role of a creator without being captured by his own creation, which is our lesson. Our lesson is to be in the world, but not be of the world. So you be in the world and be very chaste to Krishna consciousness. When you go and interact with the world, you understand that you don't belong here. You're making plans of exiting the planet. You're making plans of exiting the universe. You're making plans of wanting to do things here which are normally not done. This is basically our existence. This is what Lord Brahma is teaching us. He's practically showing us the way that one can be involved in very complex creative activities. Imagine the passion that is required to create the universe. Lord Brahma is involved in the creation of the universe, which is extraordinarily complex. And being involved in such complex activity, he is yet not being touched by this material energy. He still is offering prayers of wanting protection, wanting to be, I would say, protected from the force of nature, which is so powerful. This is what we need to do. We need to understand, how to live in this world. And we need to understand how you can be in this world, but not of this world. We need to have plans that are distinctly Krishna conscious for the future. And anything else, we act according to our circumstances. Does it mean that you neglect work? The answer is no. We do not neglect the work environment. Neither do we neglect other duties. But what we generally do is that we don't get so caught up with those identities to the point where we think that's the future. Yeah. We don't get so caught up with the professional environment to the point where we start thinking that that's the future. If that doesn't work out, then I'm lost. I don't have anything else. If something which I have planned doesn't work out, then I don't have anything else. Yeah. I really don't have anything else. This is how people think in the world. They feel that if they don't have a job, then they have lost everything. If they don't have some aspect of their life which is not working out, they have lost everything. They feel this way because this is all they have. This is their identity. For us, that is not the case. 90% of our happiness comes from being involved in Krishna consciousness. 10%, we don't want to be disturbed by this world. So we do feel that, okay, if life is peaceful, then I can concentrate more on Krishna consciousness. So for us, it's no more a matter of, okay, don't disturb me. I'm just wanting to engage in the world so that I could have enough finances so that I could run my establishment. I'm not interested in what's going on out there, but there's a practical need. So we should understand the practical need, but have concrete plans that are distinctly Krishna conscious. Because remember this, we somehow or the other, if we are facing difficulties today, to whatever extent we are facing difficulties today, we messed up 20 years back. We messed up 40 years back. We messed up a few lifetimes back because we did not desire properly. We desired based on the environment because we got caught up with the passion. We got just caught up with the passion of what the circumstances were. We desired based on the impetus that was received by the environment that we were in. We were not really desiring what was appropriate because we were not in touch with mercy. Now we have received mercy. Our desires have to be 100% aligned with mercy of being able to be very, very close to Krishna and being able to go back. So the point being is that our desires have to be written down. Write down your desires for Krishna consciousness on a daily basis. Please don't trust your minds. Write down. Pray to Srila Prabhupada so that he gives us clarity in terms of what the future ought to be. What is it that I envision 20 years hence? What do I envision 5 years hence? What do I envision 10 years hence? Write this down. And this need not be what I would call as something which needs to be the same for everyone. Each and every one of us can have aspirations, and they can all have arrangements based on their propensity, their capacity in life, the resources that have been made available because of their karma. So these arrangements themselves are different. It doesn't mean that there's any value in austerity. It doesn't mean that there's any value in, what I would call as, any kind of environment which basically is not, it does not have all the trappings. There's no value to kind of subjecting ourselves to any kind of suffering. There isn't, because that's not the requirement. The requirement itself is that we should be able to have a psychological state that is simple, which means we shouldn't be in too much worry about the eating, sleeping, mating, defending process, because that can cause disruptions in Krishna consciousness. So we want to arrange for things so that we don't get disturbed, but then the arrangement itself is not identical for everyone. It is all up to whoever they want to. So someone might require, a single room project, or someone might say that they want a 4-room project or a 4-bedroom, depends on what the person is and their resources. So there really isn't a particular, what I would call as a requirement saying that you have to be one way or the other. It's a matter of not needing material passion to a large extent for us to be able to maintain ourselves. Because if you do that, then you're also going to be dealing with desires outside of what you're thinking you can handle. Then if we do that, 20 years hence, we're going to have an environment which is anti-Krishna conscious, because you can't be making plans distinct of Krishna consciousness and then expect to succeed and be very efficient with Krishna consciousness. So it is very important for us to have an understanding that Lord Brahma is afraid of passion. We ought to be afraid of this passion ignorance, which is why Srimad Bhagavatam starts with Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu. This is highly inauspicious. Abhadreshu, highly inauspicious. Coming in touch with Srimad Bhagavatam removes this Abhadreshu. Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu removes it. All you need to do is just listen to Srimad Bhagavatam, and then it removes this Nashta Prayeshu. It just practically removes the Abhadreshu, creates an auspicious environment in the heart where we be peaceful, and we create a future for ourselves which is quite fulfilling from a Krishna conscious perspective, where we account for all the principles of Krishna consciousness to be fully vibrant. We account for sadhu sangha, we account for peaceful japa, which is nama kirtan, nama sankirtan, nama kirtan, nama smaran. We also account for coming in touch with Shastra, Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita quite profoundly, deeply. We account for coming in touch with the Dham. We account for deity worship, because that would tell us how to serve Krishna. We account for these 5 main principles in the future, and we start thinking about the future and desiring that Krishna, I really want to do a lot of all of this. I want to serve you. Please, Krishna, give me an opportunity in the future that my life in itself would be situated in such a way that I'm able to do a lot more than I'm doing right now, which is the only way for us to get out. We can't do what we are doing in terms of, day-to-day engagement with material nature fully, coming in touch with the mode of passion, and then somehow coming back and then trying to connect with transcendence. It's very difficult. So we need to have a plan for the future, and we also need to offer prayers to Krishna just as much as Lord Brahma is. Lord Brahma is a super creator. He is creating an extraordinarily complex environment, accounting for 8,400,000 different species of life. Imagine the bodies, imagine the environment, imagine the planetary systems, imagine accounting for all kinds of karmic reactions, good, bad, ugly, all of these. Yeah. And then you need to be successful at it, and then you will be able to provide this environment. He needs to do such very complex creation, very, very complex creation. And once he is done with it, he shouldn't be affected by it. So that's why he is offering prayers. So we also need to offer prayers on a daily basis that, yes, Krishna, I need to go out because I need to deal with the world, but then please protect me so that I don't get distracted. Please protect me so that I may be able to keep all the goals that our predecessors have given us, which basically are extraordinarily important for determining spiritual success. Let me keep all those goals in perspective. Let me go out there and exist just as much as a tongue would exist between two rows of teeth. You see, the tongue in our mouth exists between two rows of teeth quite efficiently. Very rarely do people bite their tongue. Very rarely. Yeah. Very rarely do we bite our tongue, but the tongue is quite efficient in not getting severed because it is able to exist within two rows of teeth, which can actually decapitate the tongue. So the tongue. So that is how we exist in the world. We do what is necessary with a reasonable understanding that this is what is required for the future. And then we also basically deeply desire more profound involvement in Krishna consciousness, great absorbed service. And we want to be freed from too much engagement in passion, because that particular too much engagement in passion is detrimental. It eats away what you've accumulated as spiritual growth. It just eats away. You accumulate spiritual credits, and then you go and participate in passion in the world, and then you sit next to someone who is permeated with material desires. And then some of those desires become ours, and we use our credits to create a future for ourselves, because you use credits. Credits are credits. You earned it. And then you basically end up getting a future in this universe, in this planet, which might be much better in terms of, I would say, resources, but which may be highly inimical to Krishna consciousness. So there's a need for planning. There's a need for writing things down. There's a need for being cognizant that there's a real risk. There is. So you can't just exist without understanding and accounting for all these pitfalls, which is why in the third canto, Lord Brahma is teaching us how to act. He is practically saying that, yes, you have to act, but then you have to act according to instructions, and you have to act according to inspiration. And that inspiration comes from the Krishna himself. For us, the instructions have already been given. We know what's going to make us happy. We just need to know how to engineer that to a maximum extent in the future. So we really need to desire this, put it down on paper saying, this is what I want to see manifest. And the reason, if you put it down on paper and present it to Srila Prabhupada, this Prabhupada will give us intelligence to plan our future. He will. He will practically give us intelligence in our heart to plan our future, which is in alignment with Krishna consciousness. So we always put things down on paper, present it to our deities, present it to Srila Prabhupada saying, this is my plan. Krishna, if any of this that I've written down is going to be inimical to Krishna consciousness, I request you to sabotage that particular plan. Sabotage the idea, because I do not want to go away from Krishna consciousness no matter what the price. I do not want to go away. So if I have plans that are not in alignment with my future and my being able to serve you properly, please give me the intelligence to reject them. Please give me the intelligence to please just sabotage them, because I'm not very good at learning. I'm not very good at learning. I have been so bad at learning that I've spent millions of lifetimes away from you, and there's a chance that I might again do it. So just sabotage my plans that are not in line with your mission. Allow me to exist for you. Allow me to serve you. So this particular aspect requires active prayers, active endeavor. This is what we're going to learn in this chapter. Now we're going to read 15 through 35 of chapter 9 of Canto 3. These are prayers of Lord Brahma, and you can see all kinds of emotions coming forth. There is humility, there's fear, and then there's lamentation, all kinds of emotions. And then there's also this reassurance given by the Lord, because when he sees someone very sincere, he's actually instructing him. So let's just lead through the verses and as we move forward. Text 15. I'm just reading the translation. Let me take shelter of the lotus feet of him whose incarnations, qualities, and activities are mysterious imitations of worldly affairs. One who invokes his transcendental names, even unconsciously at the time he quits his life, is certainly washed immediately of the sins of many, many births and attains him without fail. Nama naminoho abhinnatvam. Nama naminoho abhinnatvam. There's no difference between the name and the named. There's no difference between Krishna and his name. So, which is what this particular verse is trying to attribute this to, saying one who invokes his transcendental names even unconsciously at the time he quits his life is certainly washed immediately of the sins of many, many births and attains him without fail. Your lordship is the prime root of the tree of planetary systems. This tree has grown by first penetrating the material nature in three trunks, as me, Shiva, and you, the Almighty for creation, the Almighty, you, the Almighty, for creation, maintenance, and dissolution. And we three have grown with many branches. Therefore, I offer my obeisances unto you, the tree of the cosmic manifestation. People in general all engage in foolish acts, not in the really beneficial activities enunciated directly by you for their guidance. As long as the tendency for foolish work remains powerful, all their plans in the struggle for existence will be cut to pieces. I therefore offer my obeisances unto him who acts as eternal time. We spoke about it briefly in the last session. Sometimes one wonders, why should there be destruction? Sometimes destruction is to be appreciated because it puts an end to things which are not good. Even if you want to end something which is highly inauspicious, you need the power of Lord Shiva. Yeah. So we notice in Canto 8, during the Samudra Manthan, during the churning of the milk ocean, because of the intense activity of churning, the first manifestation was all kinds of extraordinarily powerful poison, very, very vicious poison, the hala hala poison, as they call it. So it was Lord Shiva who plays the role of the Gunavatar, of Tamas, who practically had the ability to end the prowess of the poison by condensing it and swallowing it. So Lord Shiva, even though he acts as what I would call as an agency of time, because he is Rudra, he destroys the body. Yeah, it is Lord Shiva's function to destroy when the time comes, but he is also stopping and ending things that are highly inauspicious. And that is why he is also a guru, because he is the spiritual master of the whole world, simply because of the fact that just as much as a guru removes ignorance, the human body and even the creation is nothing but ignorance because it's temporary. And Lord Shiva, by destroying it, he removes this ignorance. So he is compared to Guru Tattva. Shiva Tattva is the same as Guru Tattva. Both remove ignorance, and he also plays the role of a spiritual master. So here, Lord Brahma in the verse is talking about eternal time. Sorry, he's talking about what we would call as eternal time, time that is eternal. And the time factor is so powerful that nothing can stand in front of it. Lord Shiva, as a destroyer, acts as a functionary of that time factor. It is Krishna's potency, but then Lord Shiva represents that potency because he is the time factor, Kala. Yeah. So he's practically acting as the time factor because, time destroys. So if you're going to play the role of a destroyer, then that basically is your function, which is what Lord Brahma is actually saying. He's saying there are so many inauspicious things, and that requires destruction. So you do so in the function of eternal time. Your Lordship, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who are indefatigable time and the enjoyer of all sacrifices, although I am situated in an abode which will continue to exist for a time duration of 2 paradas, although I'm the leader of all other planets in the universe, and although I have undergone many, many years of penance for self-realization, still I offer my respects unto you. O my Lord, by your own will, you appear in various species of living entities, amongst animals lower than human beings, as well as among the demigods, to perform your transcendental pastimes. You are not affected by material contamination. You come just to fulfill the obligations of your own principles of religion, and therefore, O Supreme Personality, I offer my obeisances unto you for manifesting such different forms. So these verses are also realizations of Lord Brahma of the Chatushloki that is described in the 2nd canto, 9th chapter, 32 through 36 verses. The Chatushloki talks about Lord Narayana existing before Lord Brahma. So that is being established here. Lord Brahma is searching for his origin, and then Lord Brahma finds his origin as Narayana, which is Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. He's lying on the Garbhodaka Vishnu. So he finds that his origin is Narayana. So that is the first verse of the Chatushloki. Then the second verse of the Chatushloki is practically being spoken of here, where in this particular verse, he is saying that even though you engage in such activities, you're not contaminated. There's no contamination. There's no influence of material nature. Krishna is not involved, or rather influenced by material nature, even though there's such deep involvement. He is a super soul. He is within the heart of all living entities, and he is also within the heart of all kinds of, very low level entities as a super soul, but he is not contaminated by that presence, just as much as the sun's rays touching different inauspicious substances do not contaminate the sun god. Surya Narayana, the sun god, is not contaminated by coming in touch with abominable substances that the sun rays would come in touch with on this planet. He is not. In a similar fashion, the super soul who is within, he is in all kinds of complex environments in very, very low conscious entities, engaging in all kinds of abominable activities. He is an observer, and then he doesn't get contaminated. So that is also a part of the Chatushloki. O my Lord, by your own will, you appear in various species of living entities. This is the verse we spoke of now. My Lord, you accept the pleasure of sleeping in the water of devastation, where there are violent waves, and you enjoy pleasure on the bed of snakes, showing the happiness of your sleep to intelligent persons. At that time, all the universal planets are stationed within your abdomen. So even though Krishna, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, he is lying on the water of devastation, where there has been all kinds of violent activity and disturbances, he is undisturbed, and he is completely transcendentally situated. So he is undisturbed and he is transcendentally situated, even though in the midst of very violent waves, because he is lying in the water of devastation. O object of my worship, I am born from the house of your lotus navel for the purpose of creating the universe by your mercy. All these planets of the universe were stationed within your transcendental abdomen while you were enjoying sleep. Now your sleep having ended, your eyes are opening like blossoming lotuses in the morning. Now, when we say planets were situated in the lotus abdomen of the Lord, passion and the living entities were situated, so on and so forth, we would want to understand that these are all subtle manifestations. This is not gross. The gross manifestation is what comes when Lord Brahma begins the process of creation. These are subtle manifestations of what is supposed to exist. So in the other words, if there are supposed to be 14 planetary systems, there's already a subtle manifestation which is within the Lord. And then the subtle manifestation is given form by Lord Brahma as the creator. So it is not the gross aspect, it is the subtle aspect. So this is contained within Krishna, because Krishna, as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, is very subtle. Lord Brahma couldn't find him. He couldn't see him, even though he travels below and the lotus stem, trying to find out where he is. He couldn't find it because he's very subtle. He could only be revealed because he desired to reveal himself. He just wanted to say, give darshan to Lord Brahma. But then, Brahma couldn't see him. He couldn't really see him. So it's very subtle. In a similar fashion, these planetary bodies and so on that are manifest within the Lord, these are also subtle. Once the subtle aspect is given to Lord Brahma, then he has a conception, he has the intelligence to create and manifest the gross. The gross is what we are in. Below the earth, all the planetary systems are very gross. Above the earth, Swarga, then you have Maharloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, Satyaloka. These are all very subtle forms. So it is subtle. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It simply means that it is subtle. So it exists for a much, much longer time than the gross manifestation, which is our planet and below our planet. Let the Supreme Lord be merciful towards me. He is the one friend and soul of all living entities in the world. And he maintains all for their ultimate happiness by his 6 transcendental opulences. May he be merciful towards me so that I, as before, may be empowered with the introspection to create, for I am also one of the surrendered souls who are dear to the Lord. So now here's where he is begging for mercy. He is begging for mercy where he is saying that I need to be empowered because I can't even be introspective in my creation. I need to be empowered for me to be able to engage in this extraordinarily powerful process. I cannot be engaging in this very powerful process and be not affected by it and so on unless I'm empowered. So he's basically praying now and he's requesting mercy. The Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, is always the benefactor of the surrendered souls. His activities are always enacted through his internal potency, Brahmā, or the goddess of fortune. I pray only to engage in his service in the creation of the material world, and I pray that I not be materially affected by my works, for thus I may not be able to give up the false prestige of being the creator. He's afraid of having a false prestige of being a creator. Lord Brahma is afraid of having the false prestige of becoming the creator. He is afraid of being the creator because if he thinks that he is a creator and he develops false prestige and he moves away from his identity, he will again come back as Lord Brahma because he has actually seen what he can be. Even Lord Brahma doesn't want to be Lord Brahma. We should question ourselves as to what we want to be on this planet. This is an extraordinarily insignificant planet with all kinds of complexity and poor quality of life, with disease, death, whatever you call it. As depressing as all of this may sound, the reality is that even in higher planets like Satyaloka, an enlightened personality such as Lord Brahma, he is afraid of becoming Lord Brahma again because he doesn't want to take on the identity of being a creator. Instead, he wants to take on the identity of being a servant. Yeah, which is quite powerful. Yeah, this is basically how it is revealed that madness has ended. Yeah, the madness of identifying with our roles, identifying with the body, identifying with the work within this world. When it ends, it means that there's clarity. It's lucid clarity. One starts offering prayers saying, no, I don't want this again. I do not want to come back. And here Lord Brahma is saying, I don't want to be Lord Brahma again for another 1 trillion years, to be away from you and from your service, direct service. He doesn't want that. So he's afraid of identifying himself as a creator because that's false pride. And then he will establish that identity. Then he has to come back because that's the desire. The Lord's potencies are innumerable. He lies down in the water of devastation. I am born as the total universal energy from the navel lake in which the lotus sprouts. I am now engaged in manifesting his diverse energies in the form of cosmic manifestation. I therefore pray that in the course of my material activities, I may not be deviated from the vibration of the Vedic hymns. Again, Lord Brahma offering prayers because he's afraid. He is afraid that he may get caught up in the passion of creation and material energy. Quite fascinating. The Lord, who is supreme and is the oldest of all, is unlimitedly merciful. I wish that he may smilingly bestow his benediction upon me by opening his lotus eyes. He can uplift the entire cosmic creation and remove our dejection by kindly speaking its directions. This is basically Lord Brahma desiring that Krishna speak to him. The sage Maitreya said, O Vidura, after observing the source of his appearance, namely the personality of Godhead, Brahma prayed for his mercy as far as his mind and words would permit him. Thus, having prayed, he became silent, as if tired from his activities of penance, knowledge, and mental concentration. The Lord saw that Brahma was very anxious about the planning and construction of the different planetary systems and was depressed upon seeing the devastating water. He could understand the intention of Brahma, and thus he spoke in deep, thoughtful words, removing all the illusion that had arisen. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O Brahma, O depth of Vedic wisdom, be neither depressed nor anxious about the execution of creation. What you are begging from me has already been granted before. O Brahma, situate yourself in penance and meditation and follow the principles of knowledge to receive my favor. By these actions, you'll be able to understand everything from within your heart. O Brahma, when you're absorbed in devotional service in the course of your creative activities, you will see me in you and throughout the universe. And you will see that you yourself, the universe, and the living entities are all in me. You will see me in all living entities as well as all over the universe, just as fire is situated in wood. Only in that state of transcendental vision will you be able to be free from all kinds of illusion. Fire, Agni Tattva is present in wood. And that's what allows wood and forest fires to start, because they start scrubbing, or rather brushing against each other. And when they start brushing against each other, it creates a fire because fire is already present within the wood. And that's why there are different kinds of wood used for japa. For example, we use tulsi beads. Tulsi has a very high level of Agni, because there is a need for Agni while you chant. Yeah, because we are transforming, we are coming in touch. There has to be some capacity for japa. So Tulsi Mala has a lot of Agni. So when you come in touch with Tulsi, it offers you that facility that you are able to chant. Tulsi is also very sensitive, which means you need to protect the Tulsi Mala within a bag. And you need to be able to keep things very clean. And the reason is that Tulsi has the ability to be affected quite easily as well. She's very sensitive. So that's why you need to be very careful with how you keep your japa beads and how clean they are, how clean our hands are before you touch them, etc., is because she's very sensitive. Now, the same is seen with Rudraksha. The Shiva mantras, you see Lord Shiva chants with Rudraksha beads. Lord Shiva's mantras are chanted with Rudraksha. Rudraksha has a lot of Agni, tremendous amount of Agni as well. However, Rudraksha is not as sensitive as Tulsi. And Lord Shiva wears the Rudraksha and he chants on the Rudraksha because sometimes he is found in the crematoriums. You can find Lord Shiva in the cremation grounds. The Rudraksha doesn't get affected by that contamination. It doesn't. But Tulsi, it will get affected. So Tulsi, you need to protect, you need to kind of ensure that the japa beads are kept very much, I would say, clean. Our hands have to be clean. If you are sick, then you should be very careful in ensuring that you're touching the Tulsi beads very carefully, especially if you're initiated. What does happen is that the beads are blessed. The blessing has been given, but the beads are also blessed, which means you can actually invoke blessings into the beads. And that's what the spiritual master does when they basically chant on the beads before giving us the beads for chanting during our initiation. Then you need to protect that. You need to kind of protect it very carefully. So we should be very careful with our japa beads. The more you take care, the better off you'll be. It's not a casual situation. It is not casual because it is very sensitive. So here, the same example is being given that Krishna says that just as much as fire is hidden, it's unseen, but it is present in wood, in a similar fashion, I'm present in everything and you will see me. Yeah, you will see me in all living entities as well as all over the universe, just as fire is situated in wood. Only in that state of transcendental vision will you be able to be free from all kinds of illusion. So vision, Krishna is saying, if you can't see me, you're an illusion. If you cannot see me, you're an illusion. He's practically telling Lord Brahma, you should be able to see the super soul in all living entities. You should be able to see the super soul. You should be able to see me in all the universes as a manifest. Otherwise, you're an illusion. When you're free from the conception of gross and subtle bodies, and when your senses are free from all influences of the modes of material nature, you will realize your pure form in my association. At that time, you will be situated in pure consciousness. Since you have desired to increase the population innumerably and expand your varieties of service, you shall never be deprived in this matter, because my costless mercy upon you will always increase for all time. You are the original Rishi, and because your mind is always fixed on me, even though you will be engaged in generating various progeny, the vicious mode of passion will never encroach upon you. You are the original Rishi. You know, in India, from Indian families, you have this whole concept of genealogy. When you go to a temple here, which is a regular Hindu temple, they will ask you before the yajna, before the puja, what is your gotra? The gotra is basically genealogy, because genealogically you're connected to a sage. So there are different sages who are all progeny of Lord Brahma, and you are connected to a sage. So there's a family which is connected to one sage. And then that family will not marry someone who also belongs to the same gotra, which is the same sage. So for instance, a very well-known family tree would be Bharadvaja. Bharadvaja Rishi is Bharadvaja Gotra, which is a certain lineage. And that particular lineage, whoever has Bharadvaja Gotra, they will not marry into another family of the same Gotra, which is how they preserved, I would say, genetic isolation. They didn't want to kind of encourage the mixing of the same kind of genes, etc. So this is how it was preserved, because genealogically, we are all connected to the sages, and the original sage is Lord Brahma. So that particular aspect is what is being spoken of here. Although I am not easily knowable by the conditioned soul, you have known me today because you know that my personality is not constituted of anything material, and specifically not of the 5 gross and 3 subtle elements. When you were contemplating whether there was a source to the stem of the lotus of your birth, and you even entered into that stem, you could not trace out anything. But at that time, I manifested my form from within. O Brahma, the prayers that you have chanted praising the glories of my transcendental activities, the penances you have undertaken to understand me, and your firm faith in me, all these are to be considered my costless mercy. This is like a final revelation that yes, you have chanted prayers, you've engaged in tapasya, you've engaged in all kinds of transcendental activities. All of this is costless mercy. It does not have a material cost. Neither was there any qualification that allowed for this to manifest. This is just costless, ahetuki. Yeah. It does not have hetu, it does not have a particular material cost, it does not have a cause or a qualification to bestow upon all of these. It is just costless that you are able to engage in transcendental activities. You are able to engage in what I would call as a very specific penance, and you are able to kind of know me, see me, etc. This is all just costless mercy. I am very much pleased by your description of me in terms of my transcendental qualities, which appear mundane to the mundaners. I grant you all benedictions in your desire to glorify all the planets by your activities. You know, when Krishna gives this kind of a benediction to anyone who wants to engage in the process of creation, what could stop them? Nothing, because all obstacles are being removed. Krishna himself would come because he has to keep his promise. So we notice that whenever Lord Brahma's creation process was obstructed, Krishna appeared. For instance, Hiranyaksha, he took the planet Earth and submerged it in the Garbhodaka ocean. The moment he did that, Krishna appeared as Lord Varaha. He appeared as Lord Varaha and then went after Hiranyaksha so that Lord Brahma's activities could be continued. Yeah, the process of creation could be continued. And Krishna practically went after him as Varahadev. Yeah, so all kinds of different problems that are created are being resolved by the Lord because he has benedicted him. This promise has been made, so he's going to keep his promise. Any human being who prays like Brahma and who thus worships me shall soon be blessed with the fulfillment of all his desires, for I am the Lord of all benediction. This is an amazing Falashruti. You see, every big prayer set of verses, for example, the Acharyas could write a set of verses praising the divine activities of Shri Shri, Radha and Krishna. And then there would be one verse which could be called the Falashruti. And the Falashruti itself is such that, you know, whoever reads these verses sincerely would get this particular fruit. Phala is fruit. So there's a particular verse which is injected right at the bottom, which gives the fruit. The author has the ability to benedict the reader with that fruit. In a similar fashion here, Krishna says, whoever reads all of these prayers and then acts just as Lord Brahma did in terms of the sincerity, then they're going to receive all kinds of benediction for the fulfillment of all desires. It is the opinion of expert transcendentalists that the ultimate goal of performing all traditional good works, penances, sacrifices, charities, mystic activities, trances, etc., is to invoke my satisfaction. I am the super soul of every individual. I am the supreme director and the dearest. People are wrongly attached to the gross and subtle bodies, but they should be attached to me only. By following my instructions, you can now generate the living entities as before. By the dint of your complete Vedic wisdom and the body you have directly received from me, the supreme cause of everything. You know, imagine receiving a body from Krishna. If you receive a body from Krishna, that body won't disturb you in Krishna consciousness. So similarly, when we desire things in the future, when we desire things and Krishna grants them, they will not interfere with our Krishna consciousness. So it's very important to align our desires with our identity of wanting to serve him as much as we can. And the more we do so and more successful we are in being able to offer such prayers, lesser would be the influence of the manifestation of anything from such prayers. It won't influence us. This happened with Yudhishthira and the Pandavas during the Mahabharata. They won the Mahabharata, they won everything. But then in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Srila Sanatana Goswami Pad, he is also giving an opinion that because the entire manifestation of opulence was derived through Krishna's mercy, they were not affected by the kingdom. So even if you win a kingdom, with all its opulences and with all the trappings, it will not affect you because Krishna has arranged it. So this is the benediction that's been given by him. Because I've given you a body which has been made by me, so you won't be affected. Don't worry. The sage Maitreya said, after instructing Brahma, the creator of the universe, to expand, the primeval Lord, the personality of God in his personal form as Narayana, disappeared. So with this, we end the last verse of chapter 9. And basically, chapter 9, I want to quickly summarize. We started out with Lord Brahma offering prayers, and these prayers had multiple emotions. There was lamentation because he saw the water of devastation. He also saw the suffering of the living entities. He also saw that he's going to create a particular sandbox. He's going to create what I would call as an environment for further incarceration of the living entities. So there was lamentation that they are so caught up in this that they're just going to suffer, they're going to get smashed. So he's practically realizing the extraordinary condition of the living entities. And as a consequence, he's offering prayers. Then there is fear. So you're seeing the emotion of fear because he's very afraid. He's very afraid because he has had direct experiences with the Lord. So as you advance in Krishna consciousness, you become very afraid because you've received a gift. And you don't want to commit offenses because you lose the gift. So it is said that offenses are committed by those who don't have much to lose anyways. Offenses are committed by those who don't have much to lose anyways. Because if they have gained profoundly, then they would be very afraid to lose it. Then they would be offering prayers like Lord Brahmā. They would say, I'm very afraid to lose my position. I have now realized who I am. He's also afraid to become filled with false pride. I don't want to be filled with false pride as a creator because I understand that it is you who are empowering me. Please, Krishna, don't fill me, just prevent this false pride from coming. Please help me so that I can be free of this. Let me be free from the influence of this very extraordinary, vicious nature of passion. So these are very relevant prayers for each and every one of us. Because if there is any entrapment, if there is something called abhadreshu, that which is highly inauspicious in this creation, it is the mode of passion. Because mode of passion, when it is not fulfilled, it would become the mode of ignorance. It becomes the mode of ignorance. Passion very rarely upgrades to the mode of goodness. For that, you need to come in touch with someone very powerful. You need to come in touch with Krishna's names. You need to come in touch with Krishna's form. You need to come in touch with all the paraphernalia that's associated with the Lord for you to upgrade from passion to the mode of goodness and beyond. Normal circumstances, passion does not get fulfilled. And passion basically deteriorates and falls into the mode of ignorance. And then people suffer like anything because they have had desires that do not get fulfilled. So Lord Brahmā is being given an assurance by the Lord that don't worry, I'll protect you. Because you're engaging in activity for me, I'll protect you. So it's very important for us to have a clear understanding of what we want for the future, write down those things, and then present it to Srila Prabhupada and beg him to offer us intelligence so that we could plan properly, desire properly, and also beg him to sabotage our desires that are not in line with Krishna consciousness. Sabotage those unwanted plans which we could have unwittingly created because we are in touch with material nature, which are not in line with Krishna consciousness. We don't want to achieve anything in this world that can take us away from Krishna consciousness. And this requires active praying like Lord Brahmā, which is what is being demonstrated in this chapter. So we'll stop here. We'll see what questions you have, and then we can move on to the next chapter in the subsequent sessions.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for a very nice class.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, you mentioned about Bharadwaj Gotra. And when I went to India this time, and I went to any temple, they asked me, what is your Gotra? What is your thing? I don't have any, Prabhu. Then if we are initiated, can we say we are part of a Gotra?
No, we can. Srila Prabhupada practically said we are Achyuta Gotra because Achyuta is Krishna.
Okay.
And we belong to his family. That's our aspiration. So you can simply say Achyuta Gotra, or you could just nod your head. That's perfectly fine. Yeah. It's perfectly fine. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so there's a question on chat. Let me just see. My understanding is Lord Brahmā, like other demigods, is a position, and anyone can become Brahmā if they perform the prescribed duties for 100 lifetimes. So when we say that Brahmā created the universe, are we just talking about one living entity being in the position or several living entities in the position? Does one occupier of the position always continue from where the last one left? The idea is, yes, Lord Brahmā is Jiva Tattva, which means that if an entity has lived according to the principles of Varnashram for over 100 lifetimes and has become completely purified of the effects of his karmic reactions, then he has the ability to occupy himself in the seat of Lord Brahmā. So he's chosen to occupy and become Brahma. Now, his own lifetime is the calculation of the Devas. He completes his tenure, and then someone else comes as a Brahma. They complete their tenure. And if there are times when a suitable living entity is not present or available, Krishna officiates as Brahma, he becomes Brahma. So there are instances in Srimad Bhagavatam where that role is also taken up by Krishna. So you also find that role. So the answer is yes. It is always a continuation from where the last one left. And it is a position, yes. And it is occupied by living entities, but it can also be occupied by the Lord if suitable, qualified living entities are not found. Would you be able to speak about any hindrances that one can face being situated too comfortably, even in the mode of goodness, and slowing down the process of going into pure transcendental consciousness? Yes, the mode of goodness can introduce a certain level of complacency. And complacency is greatly detrimental in one sense, because the mode of goodness can actually make us feel that we are doing very well and we are doing okay. You will normally find this amongst very pious Indians. In Hindus, you can find this. If you're very pious, they generally have a life which is mode of goodness. Yeah. And then there's a certain complacency. There is no intensity for them to be able to penetrate the modes of nature and to go beyond. So that's the principle. The idea is that there is no intensity. So there's a need for understanding that the mode of goodness is a platform. The mode of goodness is not a role. It is not some kind of a goal. Peace in material life is not the goal. We want to ask for Krishna consciousness, and we want to proceed with and advance in Krishna consciousness. And we are not really asking for mode of goodness. So we are not going to ask for saying that we want to be in the mode of goodness, because complacency is a symptom of the mode of goodness. And then there are a few other things that are also associated with it. For example, one might feel a very high need for recognition in certain ways. That's basically mode of goodness, but there's also a slight interspection with passion. So you have certain influences coming by. So one can make advancement. They can be in the mode of goodness and still have subtle attachments which they do not even know. So as a consequence, it is always best to offer prayers and wanting to give what we have and push ourselves to the maximum, and to ask for whatever is most required and most necessary for us to make advancement. Not necessarily what can make us complacent, not necessarily what is comfortable for us. So we want to ask for what is required for Krishna consciousness. So what is it that I need, not what I want? I want peace, but that may not really help me. I might need something else. So that's where you need prayers, and you need to kind of position ourselves for success, where we're ready to come out of our comfort zone. We're ready to be a little bit displaced here and there so that we're able to move forward as well. Yes. One moment. So can you give examples of what we can aspire in the next 5 to 10 years? Also, I was wondering, when Lord Brahma sees Krishna, why couldn't he just pray to be taken away from the material world and serve Krishna? Why does he pray that he could stay here in a world of passion to serve Krishna? Well, that is Trinadapi Sunichena, Taroriva Sahishnuna, Amani Manadena, Kirtane Sadahari. Trinadapi Sunichena is to be able to become as humble as a blade of grass. But then what does it mean? It means that you accept what Krishna has given you. You understand that if I have become Brahma, this is exactly what I need for me to go back. I need to be Lord Brahma. I need to execute my duties as Lord Brahma. And if I execute my duties as Lord Brahma, then I should be able to go back. So Krishna has given him the position of Lord Brahma. As a consequence, he realizes this is my duty. We do not want to understand and think that where we are as of today is not being well thought of by Krishna. We want to accept where we are as of today as what has been arranged by the Lord, as inefficient and inept as it may be. We want to accept it and say, you have given me this position, you have put me here. I think this is your plan, Krishna. I just want to ensure that this plan doesn't incarcerate me. This is basically my circumstance. Sorry, not this plan, but basically my circumstance doesn't keep me here. Please let me have, kind of make advancement as we proceed further. This is very important. Now, that's why he doesn't pray that he could just stay here, leave the world. He's basically wanting to accept it and tolerate the circumstances of being in this world. This is what we are supposed to do. We accept the circumstances of life as arranged by Krishna. We tolerate the circumstances. Then one is able to basically offer respects to others because he understands how insignificant we are. Then we offer respects. Then one is able to do Harinam Sankirtan. Kirtaniya Sada Hari. Then your question was, what is the example of what we can aspire for 5 to 10 years? The aspiration is basically any kind of a plan of resources that we need should be put on paper so that we understand that, okay, this is what I need. I need a home, I need a roof, I need to be able to do this, do that, have a plan so that we can think about it very carefully so that our desires don't go crazy. It is all reflected upon, introspected. It is all on paper that can be presented, thought over. So that's the whole idea. When you say that upper planetary systems are subtle, does it simply mean that we cannot see them from here? I assume that even on these planets, living entities will have a gross body as well as a subtle body. They don't have a gross body in the sense that they have a body which is quite subtle. It is not like our gross body. So in a relative sense, they don't have a gross body like ours. Our body is abominable. We have a gross body, which is abominable. And then we have a subtle body. They have a subtle and a gross body, but that gross body is also very subtle. That's the difference. And we can't see them, but it is quite subtle as well. You mentioned that Lord Brahma also desires to leave his position and return to Krishna. Does it mean that even in such an elevated position, a living entity experiences suffering, or his motivation is different? The answer is yes. The more elevated you are and the more Krishna conscious you are, the greater the awareness of suffering, which essentially means that the whole lamentation of Lord Brahma is coming out because of his compassion. He is now in a very elevated position. He is experiencing elevated consciousness. He is experiencing awareness, but he's also being exposed to intense suffering of other living entities. So he is in a position of deep compassion, wanting to bring the compassion out because he feels, I'm experiencing such wonderful phenomena, but then I'm involved in this creation and I'm creating a sandbox for people to play with, and they are just incarcerating themselves. And this circumstance is so terrible. So he's lamenting because of his high consciousness, and that is his suffering. So this is like the suffering of a pure devotee, because they feel very, very, very intensely sorrowful of the suffering of others. So for example, there is this example in, I'm not sure, in the Leelamrita, where Srila Prabhupada was passing by and he was taking a walk with some of his disciples next to a high-class country club in America. And as I was walking by the country club, he could see retired old men, gentlemen in America playing golf. And he practically shed a tear. The devotees say that he literally cried, saying, these people just don't know they're going to die. And they're going to get into such deep trouble. They just do not even understand that they're supposed to focus on something far more profound, because they seem to be enjoying themselves pushing a ball into a hole. You see, Srila Prabhupada was crying. Now, how many people would cry when you look at very rich old men playing golf in a country club? You wouldn't. But because Srila Prabhupada was of such high consciousness, because he was a pure devotee, he was able to recognize the nature of suffering. And because he was so elevated and he was experiencing the amazing consciousness of being in touch with the Supreme Lord, he was actually understanding the profundity of people who are not in touch with Krishna. And that's why he was shedding tears. This is the same thing with Lord Brahma. That's why he was suffering. He was in an elevated position, And then he was in touch with Lord Narayan. He had an audience with him. And then he found all these living entities for whom he's creating a home. He's creating the planetary system. And he's actually crying out in lamentation because he is suffering on behalf of others. Sometimes we say that Krishna has 6 opulences, and sometimes we say 64. Is there any distinction between the two, except that one goes into more detail? The answer is yes. The point is yes. There are 64 different qualities of Krishna, and these are all in an absolute limitless aspect. But these qualities themselves are being grouped into what we would call as 6 different opulences. And these opulences are broadly that which can be viewed as being held by Krishna's awe-inspiring form of Narayan. So, for example, beauty, wisdom, knowledge, power, fame, yeah, and then what else? Wealth, and then the idea of not being affected by any of this, which is the detachment and renunciation that comes with this. So this is the opulence of Lord Narayan, which is being grouped into 6 different broad categories. And these opulences are desired by everybody. If you actually notice, we desire people who have these opulences. If someone is very good looking, we are very attracted to them because they carry a minuscule, very small percentage of Krishna's opulence of beauty. If someone is very, very rich, they have the ability to attract followers because they carry a very small fraction of Krishna's wealth. So is the case with people who are renounced. They have the ability to attract people because they carry the ability to attract people simply because they carry a portion or a minuscule quantity, very minute quantity, representative quantity of the opulence of Lord Narayan, which is absolute. So the whole concept of Bhagavan with 6 opulences is attributed to the awe-inspiring, majestic aspect of Krishna, which is Lord Narayan. So it is the 60 qualities. 60 qualities. Yeah, they all can be grouped into different ways, and you can look at them that way. The 4 qualities that distinguish Krishna are super special, and they're all falling into the Madhurya aspect, the sweetness aspect. I've spoken about it a couple of classes before, so you should, if you, I know you attend my classes, but then you should go and listen again, and you'll be able to distinguish the two. But the answer is yes, but you can group them this way too as well. All right. So is there any other question or comment?
Prabhu?
Yes, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I was just thinking the fact that we are together, it says in the last, any human being who prays like Brahma and who thus worships me shall very soon be blessed with fulfillment of all his desires. For I am the Lord of all benediction. The fact that we are having this conversation and we are, so in one sense, Krishna says, I am going to fulfill the desire. So the fact that we are here asking for that, in one sense, means already that Krishna is going to fulfill our desire.
The answer is yes. Krishna has given us the opportunity. Yes, he has. But what we want to do is we want to kind of go through and take shelter of Srimad Bhagavatam in such a way that we are able to see what Lord Brahma was about to engage in, and we are able to see what we normally do. We also engage in creation, maintenance, and destruction in our own very, very little limited capacity on a day-to-day basis. So that's why this prayer has become very important, so that A, we don't take false credit for things that we basically had no capacity to do. B, we don't want to be engaging in activities which are very, very, I would say, awe-inspiring in terms of our creative ability, but without prayers. So we start offering prayers saying, I don't want to be captured by false pride. So we want to take the cues because we don't want to be captured by anything. You see, the problem is that the real objective of Krishna consciousness, one needs to taste the real objective. One needs to come very close to it for them to understand that everything else is just nonsense. Until then, there's danger of getting captured by material energy. So prayers become very important. So to answer your question, yes, we already have been benedicted, but at the same time, we also want to offer prayers. for protection. Does it make sense? It's a combination.
Yep. Thank you, Prabhu.
Sure.
Hare Krishna, bro.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, my question is related to the creation. When it's clearly stated in Bhagavatam that Lord Brahma created all these things, but why so much in the world they are searching for the origin of species, and the now current days the entire education is based on the origin of species and theory of evolution and science, everything. But is there any attempt from Vedic scholars or Vaishnavas to establish the truth, actually the creation it's been created by Brahma and Krishna, like that?
Well, here's the thing. There are 2 points to your, two answers to your question. First answer, this is the issue which Lord Brahma is also lamenting. There is a supernatural force. The karmic reactions of the living entity act as a supernatural force which pushes them into action which they themselves cannot control, snapping them out of that particular stupor, snapping them out of that particular misconceived condition requires mercy, which is what the transcendentalists like Srila Prabhupada, they facilitate by bringing people in touch with Harinam, giving them prasadam. He did something which was so profound that he wanted people to snap out of this condition. So why are people pursuing mindless objectives, and why are they particularly not accepting the Vedic conclusion is because of the powerful nature of their own karmic reactions, where they are bereft of true knowledge. So there's an issue. So how do you snap them out? You bring them in touch with Krishna through Harinam and through Prasadam, which is a very basic way, which is very non-intimidating. In addition to that, I think the Bhakti Vedanta Institute that was established by Srila Prabhupada, by Bhakti Swarup Damodar Goswami Maharaj, he left his body, but he was basically a PhD, he was a scholar, and he practically established that institute. And the whole idea was to bring out literature which spoke of science and Krishna, science and God, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So this is the issue. The issue is basically the challenge of the extraordinary supernatural force that is holding back people. And the way you bring them out of it is to bring them in touch with that which can break that particular force, which is Krishna. So that's the answer.
Yeah, that makes sense, Prabhu. Prabhu, one more thing. See, the atheism is not new. Even Charvaka Muni was talking atheism, right? But do you have any idea, like during those days, or they have they had a different opinion on the origin of species? Like, were they also believing in some Big Bang theory or something? Life come into existence without any reason, any such ideas in those days, Vedic times?
No, actually, the thing is that the atheism that is seen in philosophical conclusions that have existed before are not as obvious as they are today. An atheist of today is simply someone who has not come in touch with profound truth. It's as simple as that. They haven't really put the 100 hours required to study literature. They haven't put the 100 hours required to be introspective. They just don't have the Brahmanical quality to go deeper into and reach conclusions on what is true and what is not true. They don't have the Sukriti for them to be able to distinguish. The atheist today does not have a philosophical stance. They don't. Most people who are atheists are simply those who are unchurched and who do not have a religious perspective simply because they are not excited and inspired by what they have come in touch with through family tradition. They are not inspired and attracted to what they're surrounded by. And as a consequence, they say that I don't believe in anything. And then what you believe in is that, oh, I exist only in this lifetime. So why don't I just fix the body? Why don't I just pursue happiness towards the body? So this is the modern version of atheism, which is not quite subtle. It is not what I would call as problematic to deal with, because the modern day atheist is just looking for an opportunity. They should never be considered as problematic. They should be given opportunity to come in touch with Krishna in as many ways as possible so that their ego doesn't get hurt. but they're not really atheists because they haven't studied, introspected, put in the time for them to understand and reach conclusions. The philosophers who are considered to be atheistic is because there have been subtle missteps. There have been very subtle missteps that have occurred in the past. The very subtle missteps that have occurred in the past, for example, is in Advaita Vedanta. In Advaita Vedanta, the subtle misstep is that they worship the deities, so you can't really call them overt atheists. They worship their deities, they accept the Vedas, they follow rituals, they do everything, but then they think that the Leela of Krishna is false and it is also temporary. They think that the Jiva, which is very minuscule, can become Krishna. So this is all, I would say, is some kind of veiled atheism. Yeah. So this is a very subtle level of atheism. So ultimately, you are basically denying the existence of God by denying his Leela, by denying his, existence, etc. So this is very subtle atheism. So this is where the problems are about philosophers of those days, is that they never overtly denounce God. It is just that their philosophical conclusions, which were all pursued through speculation, reached conclusions which basically were very subtle. Yeah. So we don't want to basically think that they didn't believe in the existence of Lord Brahma and so on, because they all had visions of the demigods. There was a lot of heavy presence. There was very heavy presence of demigods on this planet, because they could conduct a yajna and the demigod would appear and give benedictions. But yet you could kind of have a philosophy which is very deviant, simply because you believe that the Leela of Krishna is also basically false. Why? Because he is in a human form. So since I'm speculating, I'm a jnani, I'm pursuing things empirically, I don't have experiences, and as a consequence, Krishna doesn't reveal himself. So he is a human being. Rama was a human being. Their names are as human as your name and my name. But then they also believe in some aspects of the Veda where it works, so on and so forth. So it's very, very subtle. And which is why the more subtle something is, the more dangerous it is. So you don't compare them to the modern day atheist who is a fool, because he has not studied philosophy. He hasn't studied very deeply. He hasn't had any experiences. He doesn't have any idea of what the rituals were and so on. He doesn't have any kind of concept of what is subtle. So that is the modern day atheist. He's by all standards of Vedic standards, he would be considered an absolute fool. Yeah, but not the munis and not the philosophers who wrote philosophies which were divergent, but their presentation developed certain subtle fractures because it was all done through speculation. So there were certain revelations that didn't come through. So that's the difference. I hope this makes sense.
That's really great answer, Prabhu. This is what I was so many times I confused how to deal with atheists and all. Prabhu, do we have time for 2 more questions?
Maybe I can take someone else's question and I can come back to you, Ravi, because there's someone else who probably wants to ask. Yeah, sure. Let me take someone else's question. I'll come back. Yeah, Haribo.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for the wonderful point. Earlier you said about when devotees in the movement are coming in contact with mode of passion, and it so happens that in devotional life that there are times where, in fact, within the scope of ISKCON itself, a person may not actually have access to the temple, or even the temple may not consider a devotee coming to the temple, or understand certain things about a person's situation, or may not understand that a person has certain levels of skill that they can actually contribute, but unable to actually express that for whatever reason. So sometimes what happens is that devotees may just be in the background, but actually live in such a way that there's no connection to the ISKCON to ISKCON in a certain way in their lifestyle and things like that, because they're just in the background, but there's no actual active engagement. So they sink more and more into passionate activities. So how can that be addressed in terms of those that are, first of all, connected to the temple, and those that live away from the temple, where they have very little access to the ISKCON temple and ISKCON resources?
I think the first point is that we could be connected to the temple. And I say this especially for the West. If you're not living in the Dham, where you're constantly stimulated by Krishna's names, you're constantly stimulated by an atmosphere of Harinam, and so on and so forth. It's just a very spiritually surcharged atmosphere where you can't miss Krishna. If you're going to be in the West, then one needs to constantly be purifying themselves through service. The limbs of the devotee have to come in touch with service, because that's the only way to purify our senses of the contamination of being in touch with areas that are not connected to Krishna. Because that's the risk in the West, because we don't have, we can really go into an atmosphere which is not connected, zero connection. And then, so we need to kind of come back and purify ourselves by ensuring that we are able to render service, which is how we need to engage in as much service as possible so that we could purify ourselves. So this is basically the very fundamental prescription for devotees who are connected to congregations, to engage in as much service as possible, especially involving their limbs, because they need to be purified of coming in touch with material energy, which is quite intense in the West. As far as devotees who do not live in the temple environment, that's a very unfortunate circumstance if they don't have association. It is very unfortunate. So sometimes they can be enthused and they can be engaged by finding out what their propensities are. And they could be engaged wherever they are by starting bhakti vrikshas. Because one of the things which happens when you preach, when anyone preaches, is the fact that we want to share realizations. Because we want to share realizations, the more humble we are, we receive realizations from Krishna. Because we want to distribute. And Krishna's interest is to inspire and distribute and enthuse a large body of people. And as a consequence, he gives realizations to those who want to share realizations. So one of the things that can be done is to facilitate the starting of a center, the starting of a Namahatta, starting of a Bhakti Vriksha by that very devotee, where give him some responsibility. He might make a few mistakes here and there, but then once he gets started, then he will come in touch with transcendence and he would be able to enthuse others as well. That would be the course that I would take.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. That's very helpful, actually. Thank you.
Sure. Haribol. Yeah, I think so. Ravindra, you want to ask the questions now? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Prabhu, when it comes to the office environment and the corporate culture, the management, they will recommend so many books like from non-devotees in achieving our success and goals. There are so many famous books, right? They conduct even seminars, all that. So how much do we need to completely deny it and just depend on what scripture is saying or what gurus are saying, even for achieving anything, that utsaha, dharya, these things? We can get the inspiration from here, or can we get inspiration from non-devotees as well, whoever great speakers and achievers in the material world?
Actually, this is an important thing. See, now the point is as follows. Our protection is for us to understand Srila Prabhupada's books. So understand the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam, understand the essence of Bhagavad Gita, Chaitanya Charitamrita. Once we become very deeply ingrained and associated with Srila Prabhupada's books, then we will be able to see that someone else who is presenting a successful methodology in your office environment, he's presenting a strategy, he's presenting some kind of, I would say, technology. I'm talking about management technology in terms of being able to manage things and inspiration, motivation. You will be able to see that at a very small level, they are drawing from what we already know is the truth, but then it is distorted because they're representing things because of their conditioning. Yeah. you'll be surprised that a lot of very powerful motivational speakers in the West, very powerful speakers like Tony Robbins, he speaks leadership series, and he is an extraordinarily well-known and successful speaker. He comes from a very deep spiritual culture. He draws from spirituality. Then there was this fellow called Steve Covey, and he was also a leadership motivator and so on, who's very well known in America in corporate circles. And you will find that his particular, what I would call as inspiration, came from, the books and the spiritual books that he was studying in his own, form of, Christianity. Christianity has its own offerings in terms of the Bible, etc. So they were going very deep into their cultures, and they were drawing principles from the Bible, and that is what was quite distinguishing and made them powerful. So you really can't be powerful and offer anything meaningful in the corporate side without having some level of truth in it, and that means coming in touch with scripture. And depending on which religion you follow, the level of truth varies. In Krishna consciousness, the level of truth is absolute. So if we learn what is the absolute, and if we understand what is the foundation of truth, then coming in touch with outside philosophies is not an issue, because we can evaluate things. So that's what I'm recommending. So you don't need to avoid what is being spoken of in your office training, but you should at least know what is actually required by Srila Prabhupada in our books. That is our protection.
That's true. Like these speakers, they're not like completely not against scripture or anything. They also relate things with God and some power, all that, some unknown power. All that. So yeah, to that level, we can definitely accept it.
No, the point I'm trying to make, Ravi, is study Srila Prabhupada's books and become very good with Srila Prabhupada's books and teachings. This would practically allow you to accept and reject what's being given out there, keeping Srila Prabhupada's books as a basis. You don't need to avoid. You can accept and reject based on what you already know is the truth. That's the point.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. One more question, Prabhu. Related to Gotras. Are there any fixed number of Gotras, and are all these Gotras are already listed somewhere, so that because I get this doubt, because when these Gotras like Bharadwaja and well-known Gotras, we can directly relate, these are names of some munis from where it started. But some Gotras, I don't think any meaning is there. Suppose my Gotra, they say Repalli. I get doubt like whether that Gotra is really there, or my ancestors picked it from somewhere, or I don't know really. And in these Telugu-speaking states, we have surnames as well. So surnames also, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, is that really Vedic culture, or just based on the village they are living, or for some other reason that surnames came like that? What is your yes?
True. See, it could very well be family tradition, and the genealogy, I think, is given. The Saptarishi names are given, and you can search Google and you'll find Saptarishis, who they are. And then you have other lesser known rishis as well, who are also Gotras. So you should be able to find that out. As far as names are concerned of families, I was just talking to a devotee who is from America, and he used to say that down the west of America, which is, I would say Mississippi, right down to the bottom, south. He said people just go, and then they go to the supermarket, and then they find a label, and then they find a label that's very attractive, and they name their child. It may not have any sense. You wouldn't even know what it means, but then they pick it up off of labels that you find, for example, in a supermarket and so on. There's, this is basically how people name in general in the West, because many names don't have what I would call as a proper understood meaning, but it sounds good to them, and then they pick it up. But in India, it could have had connections to the village, it could have had connections to a family deity, and whether those family deities were a part of the Vedic paradigm, we do not know. So, yeah, it's quite complex, but I wouldn't really say that all of that is connected to the rishis. I wouldn't.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now, one last question. Are there any specific prayers for protection from false pride you would like to recommend before these creative works? I guess just reading the prayers of Lord Brahma and then the response of the Lord, these prayers themselves are specific prayers that basically one can chant for protection from false pride, because this is basically what he's trying to do. More importantly, the chanting of Harinam can and will protect us, even though we may not ask for good qualities. Because we are coming in touch with Krishna, those good qualities would be imposed upon us, or rather gifted to us. So sincerely chanting Harinam is also the way to go. Okay, so I think I'll end here if there aren't any more questions. So we'll meet again the following week, and then we have Nasimha Chaturdasi on Tuesday. And on the 30th, I think there's still some time. It's a Sunday. I should be speaking in Leicester. I mean, it's a Zoom Srimad Bhagavatam class in Leicester on the 30th, which is a Sunday. So just wanted to give a heads up. I'll post the Zoom connection as well. All right then. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.